Hi, I'm Harley Quinn. Did you know I had a comic in the 2000s? In 1999, Harley Quinn was finally brought into the mainline Batman comics. Ushered in by none other than Paul Dini, she became a mainstay among Batman's rogues gallery for only a couple months, because not too long after, she was given her own ongoing monthly series. Helming the short-lived series was writer Carl Kessel and artist Terry Dodson, who pitched it as Love Gone Horribly, Terribly Wrong. Running for only 38 issues, it became somewhat buried within how much Harley Quinn content there is now. But is this series a hidden gem, buried after years of pastel goth aesthetic and fart humor? The series starts in a pretty interesting way when we're introduced to what seems to be Poison Ivy in a style reminiscent of the animated series, but turns out to be none other than Harley Quinn in disguise, on a mission to break out the Joker. And like the guards at Arkham, we were tricked, because soon we're given an art style switch to something more realistic. This art style change will become kind of a semi-motif as the series goes on. What we get for the majority of this half of the series is Terry Dodson's art style, which is fairly fitting for Harley. It's a lack of grittiness that gives it a more cartoony vibe, but not going too far in either direction. After freeing the Joker, she races back to their HQ, where we're introduced to Joker's loyal henchmen, Buster and Lewis, who will more or less be mainstays in the book. Though Joker is glad to be home, he can't enjoy his recent breakout just yet, because he soon discovers a theme park is using his likeness. With that, he puts Harley in charge of rebuilding the roller coaster into a death trap, made for killing the park owner. Joker's plans are soon ruined thanks to Harley adding herself into the ride, which is very subtly stated in the hey, they got in each other's way. At this point, Joker drops all pretenses and makes it clear how he really feels about her. Using her enhanced strength, which I always forget she has, she launches Joker into a neon sign, and he fucking explodes. Part of the reason I'm just kind of summarizing the first issue is because it sets up many of the important story threads that'll be followed up on later. For example, we're introduced to most of the key players. Two of these characters are Buster and Lewis, like I mentioned before, who I felt upon this second read were characterized pretty well from the start. Buster likes hurting people. Kinda just as simple as that. Lewis, on the other hand, is pretty down to earth, willing to actually level with you and carrying on a genuine conversation. There's actually a moment shared between him and Harley in the first issue I really like, talking about why they do what they do. And Lewis makes it clear he only needs the money to support his family, even going as far as documenting his experiences with the Joker. This is just in case he dies, he thinks his daughter can make a good amount of money publishing the memoirs of Joker's henchmen. Harley is a bit more simple and just states that Joker reminds her of an old boyfriend. In a way, they both have a sense of humor about the lifestyles they've chosen, albeit in different ways. Here we see something of a bond start to form. Speaking of bonds, Poison Ivy is also here, for real this time. Not happy her likeness was used to free the Joker, but being the true friend that she is, uses a similar trick during the climax to save Harley's ass. Another recurring character introduced here is Mr. Happy, or Happy Jack as he likes to be called, the park owner who blames Harley Quinn for ruining his planned grand opening. Which is ironic because her buffoonery is what saved him, but whatever. Before moving forward, I just want to reiterate how tight this first issue feels. Much of what becomes important is set up here, as well as certain character dynamics. Speaking of which, they really nailed the portrayal of Joker and Harley. I like when Joker shoots a guy and tells Harley he was just such an addict that he couldn't stop him from smoking the explosive cigar. Overall, a really strong start for the series. There is something to be said about the writing thus far. It's competently written, but nothing gave me more than a chuckle. I laughed harder at Punisher comics, but I guess that says more about me than anything. Back at the park, Happy Jack is not thrilled about Harley going free after the chaos she caused, so he hires private detectives Frank Shirley, Bob Donner, and eventually Dr. Carrie Chispaso to capture Harley Quinn. Although hesitant, they reluctantly accept her help considering how much better she seems to understand Harley's psychology. While this subplot runs in the background, our girl Harley lurks Gotham City for a new partner in crime. I guess Ivy was busy. She does this in a very chaotic way, of course, beating every goon in a bar, before gleefully waving at two henchmen arriving late to whatever meeting was meant to take place. Something the series has done pretty well so far is put emphasis on how capable Harley Quinn is, both physically and at times even mentally. She is written very naive, and at times even childish, but underneath it all, we see someone very capable of pulling jobs and having fun along the way. After a short team-up with Two-Face, which ends in a double cross, haha, Harley decides what she actually needs is to find henchmen. Once again, we got Buster and Lewis, as well as Kenny and Nix, who we actually saw a bit earlier in the bar scene when Harley kicked Nix in the balls. There's also another guy here who has his own thing going on, but to be honest, he doesn't last very long. And with that, her team of quintessential Quinnettes are born, along with their matching uniform, which I kind of actually really dig. For whatever reason, this bowling aesthetic goes really well with Harley's shtick. From here, the series is Harley dragging these guys on whatever silly shenanigans she wants to wrap herself into, while not really explaining what they're doing and why they're doing it. And they always just seem to go along with it because they're henchmen. It's what they do. Hijinks ensue. My favorite section from this entire series has to be the Wayne Manor heist. It just shows how much of a troublemaker she is in the much broader DC universe. Also, Big Barda shows up. And I love me some Big Barda.
Lord have mercy, I'm about to bust.
And on top of all that, Riddler and his gang also decide to rob Wayne Manor at the same time. And it's so much fun seeing Harley Quinn butting heads with an egotistical maniac like the Riddler, even calling him a discount Joker. The manor is decimated in the ensuing chaos. Up until this point, Harley's been more or less a nuisance, but here shit hits the fan and it's glorious. Favorite joke has to be Oracle telling Barda not to let the criminals touch the grandfather clock because, you know, the Batcave. And after Wayne Manor has been absolutely decimated, Barda comes out of the rubble triumphantly shouting, "I did it, the clock is unharmed." Something I hadn't mentioned before is that they actually make it a point to show how much of a gymnastic Harley is, constantly bouncing around with a silly grin on her face. It's details like this that really sells her kinetic energy. We also see one of the more interesting uses of the art style switches, giving us an insight into her psychology, getting a glimpse of how she sees the world, or in this case, how she processes trauma. Completely blindsided to the fact that she brutally killed this lady. It's her loony little world, and we're just living in it. As the series progresses, more of her past is explored when the PIs investigate her old college, as they believe it might have something to do with what she's been supposedly planning this entire time. I do actually dig some of what they do here, give Harley more of a reason to fall for somebody as chaotic as the Joker. Her one bad day warps her mind into having an obsession with what she believes to be Joker's worldview, that no matter how hard you try to control all the variables, things will always snowball into chaos. Similar to how her professor tried to use the Joker venom on Harley, only to poison himself and dying with a sick smile on his face. Throughout this entire arc, Harley has been obsessed with this idea of true love and how important she sees it above all else. This all really comes to a head when she plays matchmaker for both Chispaso and Donner and finally gets them together, but not without a casualty. Harley shoots Lewis, who is surprisingly okay with this fate. Looking back, he did seem to make his peace with at some point dying while henching, but in a somber moment tells Quinn it's the funnest he's ever had henching for somebody, before finally succumbing to his wound and dying. The story wraps up with Harley getting away, Donner and Chispaso getting together, and Lewis getting zipped up into a body bag. After the events that transpired in Gotham, Harley declares her calling in life is to play matchmaker. So she and her gal pal, Poison Ivy, move to Metropolis together to start a life there, and with a little mayhem along the way. With the help of easily flustered Jimmy Olsen and some Ivy-supplied pheromones, Harley starts a love advice column at the Daily Planet. Something I hadn't mentioned before is that Harley uses her feminine wiles to get her way sometimes. They really lean into that aspect of her character, which I'd have to assume Kessel took inspiration from this one panel from Mad Love. I'm not the biggest fan of this because we already have two other female villains who do this exact same thing, and I never felt like it really fit Harley to be this flirtatious manipulator. She's a psychologist. I'm sure she could be a little more clever than that. And if she's going to manipulate people, it really doesn't have to be through her body. Part of this whole scheme is specifically messing with Jimmy Olsen, who she feels deserves some torment for lying to her. Lying to her about what? I didn't know the context for this when I first read this, and I assumed it was something major, but going back and reading the Our Worlds at War Harley Quinn special, Jimmy just lied about being in a relationship with Talia al Ghul, and little did Jimmy know that is the one thing you should never, ever lie about. Fucking dumbass. During this arc, we get more silly shenanigans, one of my favorites being this part where Jimmy and Harley both recount a break-in at a facility involving the villainous duo Harley and Ivy, each telling their own side of the stories in their own distinct art styles, which is a very fun detail I really like. From here, Harley makes off with a jetpack, and Jimmy gets off. And all is well and good, until Quinn runs into Lonely Bizarro, who wants a wife. The next part is actually pretty fun. Harley finds a scientist willing to recreate the experiment that made Bizarro, but after realizing she'd have to be the test subject, she's like, nah. Unfortunately for her, Superman shows up.
What's up, faggot?
She kidnapped Jimmy earlier, by the way. In the chaos, a Bizarro Harley is made, creatively named Bizarro Harley. Come on, bizarrely was like right there. Rather than speaking in opposites, she comes out immediately nagging at Bizarro, completely scaring him off. Well, that's one issue dealt with. Now, what do we do about Quinzaro here? Oh. After a quick distraction for Superman, the true Harley makes her grand escape, but will she be able to outrun the Man of Steel? Oh. Crashing in from complete darkness and onto wooden flooring, Harley wakes up surrounded by some familiar faces. Without much pretense, she finds herself in the middle of a standoff between her gang and the cops. It isn't explicitly stated right away, but it becomes pretty clear that our girl Harley is in hell, trapped in an eternal cycle of getting her gang killed, some more directly than others. All until she's left alone, in complete, utter darkness, dreadfully waiting for when it all starts over again. After a failed attempt or two to break the cycle, she eventually realizes she really doesn't have to play by even Hell's rules. Hell is just another prison, the biggest, baddest prison of all time, but a prison nonetheless. In a very frenzied and fitting fashion, they manage to break through Hell's walls. Unfortunately for them, it's a long road ahead, as upon digging their way out, they find themselves in an Old West setting, for some reason. Seeing how much of a nuisance Quinn has become for old Etrigan, he sics a bounty hunter on her, one by the name of Ulysses Highwater. Ulysses has his own mission though. He wants to find a man by the name of Nathan Drum for what he did to his son. Being a love enthusiast, Quinn succinctly figures out why he hates Drum so much. Him and his son were lovers, something she'll take advantage of soon. First, she's got to play chicken with one of the demon cops, egging him on and using his insecurities against him. This chapter is not only a good example of Harley using her psychology smarts, but also her passion for love to her advantage. Finally, back in the Old West desert, she hands off information relating to Drum's whereabouts, along with some healthy advice for the misguided gunman. Love your son for who he is, not who you want him to be. A sweet moment, cut short by Etrigan, tells Quinn she's too much of a nuisance for even hell itself, and promptly kicks her out. Now begins one of my favorite parts of the whole series. We open back up on Earth, but this time from the perspective of Martian Manhunter, who senses something's not right in the goings-on of his city. We soon find out Harley is back from hell, but without a physical body. She's possessing people left and right. I think this just has to be one of my favorite sections just because not only is she playing off a serious character like Manhunter, but shit escalates quickly. Not only can Quinn possess people, but the more she does it, the more people she can possess at once. And because only Johns can see her, he looks like a psycho every time he tries to stop her. This is probably the most Bugs Bunny we see Harley act, and it's glorious. She just wants to have fun and annoy whatever hero stands in her way. Of course, this doesn't last forever because she's soon defeated with the help of Zatanna. And we're back to business as usual, but even here, Harley gets the last laugh as she successfully plays matchmaker between John and his PI partner. Soon after this, like an issue later, Kessel's run ends.
Oh my god! What's wrong with your face?
And I mostly enjoyed it. Like I said earlier, it's one of those things where it's clear that it's very well written. It's got setups and it's got payoffs. Characters are consistent in motivation. However, a part of me almost feels like this series is missing the sauce. Something that made Harley Quinn special from the moment I saw her on screen and onto the printed page. In both instances, she's usually written by Paul Dini, and maybe he's the sauce. Maybe he's what we need to make Harley Quinn work. Kessel apparently hadn't seen a single episode of the animated series, but from what I can tell, he took what he knew about the character and tried to tie together what he thought were her defining characteristics into a cohesive narrative. And I would say he was pretty successful. After continually bringing in low sales, DC got desperate and not only changed creative teams, but also called for an entirely new tone to take place. This half of the series is probably one of the most sudden tonal changes I've ever seen in a comic book. Not only are we establishing an entirely new status quo, but this book about a silly Looney Tunes clown girl begs the question, okay, what if she was fucking John Wick? This is now an action comic, complete with conspiracy, a romance with a cop that goes nowhere, and one-liners. So many one-liners. We get a new origin story that slightly retcons the events of her initial integration into the mainline universe. We get a version of Harley who's not afraid to kill anyone who gets in her way, all while making cheesy remarks. This new direction is penned by A.J. Lieberman, who also wrote the storyline Return of Hush, which is very similar in the way that it takes these existing characters and recharacterizes them to fit his tone and his story. Much of the writing falls into the same structuring. One character says something sarcastic, and another character responds with something ominously badass or cheeky. I don't want to shit on it too much because there are aspects I do like. I like her relationship with Doc. I can buy that they've known each other for quite some time. I also dig what they did with the ending, but we'll get to that. Another positive aspect during this section is the art. I love this more simplistic art style. It carries such a cool mood and atmosphere. Unfortunately, this tone just doesn't work at all for her. I mean, she's dressed like a clown. Why is she acting like this? Clearly, DC was desperate to keep this series afloat. The final arc revolves around a very valuable code implanted in the retina of an 11-year-old girl named Amanda, which, if scanned, would result in her going blind. Throughout these last couple issues, Harley and Amanda bond, kinda. To be honest, they're mostly hostile towards each other, all while being chased by the Mafia and the cops, all under the control of this guy, William St. James. All this revolves around some international government conspiracy, but the point is, Harley has the choice of scanning this girl's eyes and making a shit ton of money, or helping her find the doctor that could fix her eyes. Eventually, Amanda agrees to have her eyes scanned, as long as Harley promises to have the doctor fix her eyes before her eyes are damaged permanently. The story culminates into a standstill between St. James and Harley. St. James gives her an ultimatum. She can hand over the discs, which were important to the story, don't worry about it, not really important right now, ruining her chance of making a fortune, or he'll kill the doctor, forever condemning this little girl to being blinded for the rest of her life. And she goes through with it. The series ends with the sheer guilt of her actions driving her insane with guilt, eventually accepting that she'll never be cured of her cycle of madness, and she belongs in a place like Arkham. And that's Harley Quinn's short solo run in the 2000s. Overall, a pretty mixed bag. You had kind of a clear idea of what made her cool to begin with at the beginning there, but kind of completely shifted directions near the end in a very unfitting way, in my opinion. It wasn't until Paul Dini's run in Detective Comics in the late 2000s where I really do think she hit her stride within the comics. And apart from the fact that Paul Dini is the one that co-created her, I do think he's the one that carries that special sauce that makes her the charming little goofball that I love. But I do think Carl Kessel got it pretty close. And although I'm not the biggest fan of where they shifted her character after that, I can say that I am very happy that she found her place in comics, because a character as special as her truly deserves that.